everyone, and a very warm welcome wherever you're joining us from and tuning in from around the world. I'm David Cushnan, and this is the first Leaders Linked Conversations and Case Studies from Leaders in Sport. Over the next 55 minutes, expect authoritative conversation, as you would expect, on an industry hot topic, and that's the gamification of the fan experience. Before we start, I hope you're familiarising yourself with the platform that will be your friend for the next hour or so. You can personalise your experience at any time by resizing any of the boxes, and you can also ask a question of our experts at any time during the session via the Q&A box. All very straightforward. You type it in and it will come to me and I will weave it into the conversation. You can also follow along on Twitter, hashtag LeadersLinked and at LeadersBiz, of course. And you can also download the latest Leaders Special Report, also, as luck would have it, on the gamification of the fan experience. It's almost like we planned it. That's created with our partners at Lfp. So the gamification of the fan experience sits at the core of the most successful fan engagement initiatives in sport, and it's never been more important than right now, with digital delivery and consumption rising and rising, for obvious reasons, very, very quickly. So we're talking incentives, we're talking interactivity, and we're talking about how to keep fans engaged, to gain new fans, and to provide and support the insights that will help refine future activities. To help make sense of what we're seeing and where we might be going, we have enlisted a few experts to join us, 3 in fact. Let me introduce them to you without further ado. First of all, we're delighted to have with us from the Ligue de Football Professionel, Ligue, Christophe Charmoille, the Chief Digital Officer. Christophe, hello.
Hello.
Very good to have you with us. Also with us, delighted to have Tatiana Holifield, Vice President and Head of Digital Strategy at Pacers Sport and Entertainment, the parent company, of course, of the Indiana Fever and the Indiana Pacers. Tatiana, hello and good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for allowing me to be here today.
No problem at all. Great to have you with us. And last but not least, we have from Infront Sports and Media, the head of Esports and Gaming, André Fläckel. André, good to see you.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Super stuff. Our experts are here. As I said, do ask them a question at any time. Submit your questions as we go through the session today, and follow along on Twitter as well. Great to see so many of the global sports industry joining us this afternoon. Senior executives from the Toronto Blue Jays, Scottish Rugby, F1, Sky Deutschland, Inter Miami, Bournemouth, FIBA and the Chicago Fire, to name but a few, and plenty more besides. And you're all very welcome to join us. Let's get into the conversation because it's a big topic and there's a lot to discuss. Christophe, let's start with you. And a very simple question to set the scene, really. How do you and the LFP define gamification?
Well, indeed, that's a very large question, as I guess for many people involved in marketing, I guess gamification is a very broad topic. But when it comes to LFP and how we engage our fans, we have like the rough definition of saying that gamification to us is really to add any games or games-like elements to a digital content or digital activation. And of course, the objective is really to look for more interactivity, more engagement with our fans. And from a digital strategy perspective, I think the starting point is, well, as any club, league, or any publisher, we actually publish a lot of digital content, such as videos, such as statistics, such as any static or animations. And we realized that the attention time, or like the time spent in front of our screens, make that people will have less and less attention. So we know that gamification is very critical and strategic to
I don't know why that was played in there, Christophe, but you know, we'll take any innovation that we can get. Christophe, continue, please.
Yes. So that was a technical incident, no worries. What I was saying is actually that to us, gamification is really to make the fans engage and interact with our content. And it's a broader definition. To us, it goes to esports, it goes to casual gamification, it goes to fantasy. So we have started activating several activations to actually make our fans engage with our contents.
And we'll get into some of those in a few minutes' time. Tatiana, I would like to bring you in at this stage. First of all, tell us a little bit about your role at Pacers Sport and Entertainment. Obviously, you're dealing with multiple team organizations there. And tell us a little bit about how you view this term gamification.
Absolutely. So I oversee the digital strategy for our NBA team, which is the Indiana Pacers, our WNBA team, which is the Indiana Fever. We also have our esports gaming division, our NBA 2K division, which is Pacers Gaming, as well as our G League team, the Fort Wayne Mad Ants, and our arena, the Bankers Life Fieldhouse. And my role really is to create synergistic strategies across all of our digital properties. So I think for us, gamification, exactly as André said, as Christophe said, is really about interactivity and being able to increase our fan participation. We focus really on a few key areas to increase gamification, mostly within our app, within our esports and gaming division to reach a younger audience, and then with sports betting as a second screen experience.
Super, and again, we'll get into the detail of some of that shortly. To André and Infront Sports and Media, obviously an agency, so a slightly different perspective on things, I'm sure, and you're dealing with clients across multiple sports, multiple territories. What's your overall assessment of where the sports industry is at the moment as far as digital fan engagement is concerned?
I think you can combine those things. I mean, what is even on top of gaming, gamification, esports is a cultural thing, right? So it's normal for people everywhere in the world to play video games. And this is at the moment a very young generation and a few older people. And younger generations who come into this world have a more tendency to play video games, I would say, than they don't have it. And this is basically the foundation of the world we're living in that marketing, esports, gaming perspective. And at some point, it's very early. If you look at sports simulation, esports ecosystems in football, for instance, or in basketball, then football and basketball are the most developed ones, but there are also other sports simulation, esports ecosystems that are not developed at all. And even the ones in football and basketball, I think what Tatiana and Christophe are doing is great, and they're very much in front, ahead of the game compared to a lot of others. But it's still very early, and still the product is shaping and developing, and the audience, you need to work on that kind of things. And although for a lot of people, they look at esports and say it's already very developed, but in a lot of things, it's still very, very early. Although the industry is 20 years old, which is comparable to sports, still very, very young.
Christophe, let's come back to Ligue and some of the innovations and the initiatives that you mentioned. We're going to talk about esports and what you're doing there in a few minutes, but what are some of the other things that you would point to as being good examples of what we're talking about today?
Well, I think one of the most explicit examples is actually fantasy, because well, the fantasy market is actually pretty big in the US, but I think it's it's also one of the big gamification techniques here in Europe. Most of the leagues have an official fantasy, while in France we have proceeded differently because we already had a very big unofficial fantasy called MPG for Mon Petit Gazon, so it's in French. And they already have like several years of existence in France. They have almost, I think, between 500,000 and well, almost 1 million players right now. So it's a big fantasy. So us, they were already existing on the market. We have bound a partnership with them where we actually offer them visibility. They gave us also visibility. And I think when it comes to fantasy, one of the very important points I think that we have learned about fantasy is that when we speak with fans or like very engaged fans, of course they attend games, they watch games on TV, they actually follow our competitions from a weekly basis, even on a daily basis. They are very engaged. But when we speak to people actually playing to fantasy games, they tell us, I was not so much into your competition, so I was not following Ligue 1 so much, but by starting playing with fantasy, I actually start following the teams, the players, the statistics. So it's really a shift because in the last few years, fantasy has really helped our competition get more visibility and as well more engagement from our fans, because if you're really a hardcore fantasy fan, you're going to watch the games because you're like an actual coach, a digital coach. So you want to know how your players are doing in the real life. So you're going to watch the games. So I think one of the very more effective and efficient technique we have, at least as football, but it works with any other sport which is mature or non-mature on gamification. So yes, my first guess will be then to speak about fantasy, and then you have kind of secondary activations that we actually built in the last few years, such as Pick Your 11, which is actually select the most performing teams day after day or game after game. We are about to launch for the next season a score predictor platform. So we know that are very simple techniques. Pick your players, pick your score, that keep our audience and the Ligue 1 fans and the club fans very engaged.
Tatiana, that must strike a chord with you, the discussion there around fantasy. And you mentioned sports betting, and obviously we all know the story of that in the United States over the past few years, and the opportunity that presents for greater engagement and interaction. So talk a little bit, if you would, about how that's working and how that's playing out within the Pacers organization.
For us at the Pacers, we are still very early and new in this. We just had sports betting legalized earlier this year. I believe it was around January or February. So we are very early in the process of having partners come on board, sponsorships, things like that. So this is actually an opportunity where I'm looking to other countries to give me some advice and guidance on how we can continue to engage our fan base through sports betting.
Well, shall we ask Christophe to offer you some advice? What would you suggest, Christophe?
When it comes to fantasy?
Sports betting. Mm-hmm.
Well, to me, when I said, well, score predictor was like very related to, because by sports betting, we actually think about money being involved from a legal perspective. In France, as a league, we cannot operate some score predictors or any betting related with money. So the activations we were referring was actually score predictor that will then engage some rewarding related to we can offer giveaway shirts or in-stadium experiences. We know that is something that work a lot, because one of the greatest rewarding you can have, I think, as a sports fan, and I think you can ask this question to any fan in the world of any sport, is actually, I want to meet a player one day, or I want to meet my favorite player, because I think fans right now are more likely following players than teams. I want to meet my favorite player. I think the first day you go to a stadium to see a live game, it's very impressive. It's even more impressive when you actually go on the pitch. Well, in football, it's the pitch. In basketball, it's in the arena. But that's how we actually create engagement with all our activations, is to promote what we call money can buy rewarding, and that's what our fans are really looking like.
Excellent. Thank you, Christophe. It leads us quite nicely on to discuss esports in a little bit more depth, perhaps. And André, to get us into that topic and to follow on from what Christophe and Tatiana have been saying, what do you see as the main elements? It's your world, of course, esports and gaming. What elements of those sectors do you think traditional sports organisation could be drawing on as they look to enhance and keep fans engaged on a more regular basis?
Yeah, there are different opportunities and different strategies, and it really depends on what you want to achieve and also what are your opportunities. I think having a game, for instance, that is close to your to your core sports already is a win. And then the question is, how does that ecosystem look like? Is there a global tournament, a national tournament in place? Are there players in place, professional, amateurs? Are they maybe fans already from my organization? Or could I use this tool, esports, this ecosystem esports, to actually attract younger audiences to my core sports, and looking even beyond that borders, and say, like, maybe I can increase the brand awareness of my team to other territories. For instance, if you pick League of Legends or Dota 2, which is not to your core sports, then maybe you will increase brand awareness in Asia and in China, which will ultimately help you to gain a footprint there. So this is also a strategy, and it can be, depending on what kind of organization you are, a team that you are running and where you're creating content. You can have your own streamers and create content. You can host your own competitions for fans. You can maybe even connect those competitions, having an online tournament and then go to a big offline tournament, maybe in the arena, while there's the halftime show, for instance. So there are various things to do, and for sure this is an investment at some point. And then you also need to look how you will integrate this. Are you able to upsell this to sponsors and media partners? And this is for sure not something that will turn into profit after one event, but it's rather a thing that you do for a couple of years. But then it can become a substantial business pillar. And even more important, the guy who maybe have your job in 10 years in that organization will also be thankful, because there are new technologies emerging, and then you're not starting at zero at that point.
Keep your questions coming in to our experts, and they will be happy to field them. We'll weave them into the conversation over the next half an hour or so. André, wanted to stick with you and maybe pick out one or two examples of of organizations in established traditional sports who are doing esports, doing gaming well. Who would you point to?
I'm half German, so I pick one from Germany. It's a club. It's called Schalke 04 in Germany, Schalke 04. it's one of the top 3 clubs in Germany, I would say, and they early invested into esports, not like everybody else who said we want to have a FIFA team, but they hired a League of Legends team. These are 5 players, and running a League of Legends team with coaches and analysts and a chef and the coach for fitness is not cheap. And they're competing in a Champions League in Europe, and they're actually wearing that jersey. And the idea there is, of course, attract younger audiences and also widen the brand awareness. And that team plays well. And in the leagues they are playing, this is a heavily investment to be part of that kind of franchise leagues. You have to pay between 8 and 10 million in that case. And the question is, why are organizations doing it like that? And the reason for that is, if you're part owner of a league, this is probably not surprising for people in the US, but rather in Europe, you participate in central sponsorship money and central media money and central ticket money. You might even get a share of central in-game advertisements, so you're much closer to the game publisher, and it opens up a whole new world that you will have to learn. But gets interesting the deeper you get, and there is no one-size-fits-all solution, and some organizations have a similar approach, but not using their own brand because they're a little bit more cautious, I would say, but investing in teams, investing in events, maybe even create their own platforms. There are different strategies, but the Schalke 04 one is quite interesting because they're not afraid to show it, and this is what I think is impressive.
Excellent. Thank you very much, André. As I was asking that question about who's doing it well, I saw a knowing wave from Christophe. So I think that's an indication, Christophe, that you're keen to talk about what Ligue is doing with your e-league. So take us through it, the idea and how it's being executed.
Yeah, well, I was shaking hands because I know André will be very corporate and will pick a German club, but it was a joke. But no, in fact, I think when we created the Ligue in 2016, well, that was a very early stage. We could not know how if this is going to work, if we're going to have the gaming community engaging with our competition. So the first, I think the first analysis we have after 3 years of exploitation is actually that, yes, it works because our competition found its own audience. We had over, I think, 100,000 players aggregated on the last 3 seasons. But I think more importantly, what has been a great success is, I think André is right about how esports is actually a topic we discuss a lot, but I think we don't realize that it's still not so mature and we have a huge potential ahead. So by creating this domestic competition, this domestic virtual competition, the Ligue, we also have engaged with our clubs to create dedicated content to help them to realize that esports was not something fancy that we're going to last a couple of years, but it's a really an important trend. So our clubs and some of our clubs in France have created their esports franchise or have teamed up with, well, have done a partnership with an esports team to actually have some players to play at FIFA or other games. So I think one great success is we have been able to engage our clubs on a very trendy topic and very engaging discipline. And I think the other success as well is that we had a partnership with beIN Sports, which is our actual broadcaster. So it's very important for us that our broadcaster is involved into the traditional competition, but as well the virtual competition. It creates bridges, and they gave a great exposure to our competition. And I think that's also something that is constantly changing, because we are thinking about how the competition will evolve next year. If we are thinking of new format, of new way to engage clubs. But yeah, to be perfectly frank, I think the French League has started its digital transformation revolution quite late. But something we are very proud is that on esports, we were one of the first leagues to create our competition in 2016, and for that we are very proud.
Excellent. And Tatiana, we've had the league perspective from Christophe. What about the team perspective from the Indiana Fever, Indiana Pacers point of view? You have Pacers Gaming as part of your organization. Just explain a little bit about the structure of that and what it has set out to achieve.
Well, Pacers Gaming is the official NBA 2K League affiliate of our Indiana Pacers. Our team here, which is led by Cody and Spencer, they do a tremendous job of building community, and mostly on our YouTube channel. And so I think that's something that on the traditional basketball side that we've been able to mirror and really learn how to engage that fan base and build a strong community on YouTube. Also, we find that younger fans within our esports don't mind being able to switch between games in real time and the virtual experience to make to find those really exciting moments. So it's an opportunity for us to really offer exclusive opportunities that feel more personalized. When the pandemic hit, and our NBA teams had to take a hiatus and our games were canceled, we had to pivot our strategies. And a few of the teams within the NBA decided to continue out the rest of the season by playing our games on NBA 2K. So we had actual NBA players playing the NBA 2K game to try to compete against each other to finish out the season. And you can see some clips on our channel if you look at any of our digital properties. But that was a great way to kind of merge the best of the both worlds. And then we also have played around with simulating our games and taking that digital simulation and pushing it to broadcast television. So that you could actually have a computer-generated simulation playing out our NBA games and airing that on television. Unfortunately, in our case, we didn't win all of our games, so it wasn't as successful for us, but it was still a great attempt at trying something new and engaging our new audience.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we've obviously been through a period where without any live sports events, teams, leagues have been forced into the virtual, the esports, the gaming world in a way that perhaps they wouldn't have been in normal circumstances. And André, I know you had a question for our other two panelists here around the education and how organizations are gaining knowledge about this world.
Yes. I think a lot of people who watching us at the moment are at a stage where like, okay, there's something we should do and can do, but how was it for you? I don't know how early involved you were of finding information, of coming to a point where you realize there is a level of uncertainty and you just need to go that step. Yeah, maybe you can share a little bit of how it was for you.
Take a little bit of that first. I think there was two pieces of education. One, understanding the audience that esports and gaming, e-gaming brings, which was much younger, and their behaviors were a lot different than our traditional, NBA basketball audience. And so a lot of that was really diving into the behavioral trends and deeper insights around our audience demos. And then the second piece of that was really around sponsorship. It was very it continues to be very difficult to educate our sponsors and our clients around what the opportunities are, because this is brand new inventory that they really have not really had an opportunity to digest or understand the metrics and KPIs behind how to add value and how to grow their awareness or convert whatever their KPIs are. So I would say those are the two biggest areas that we've had to really try to educate people around.
And Christophe?
So André, your question was about what did we learn from our esports initiatives, or your question was related to COVID lockdown and what we had to do during this time without live sports?
No, maybe more in the beginning without COVID, when you had maybe, or your team, the decision in mind, you want to do esports, what kind of challenges were you facing, maybe also internally, how did you manage to solve them? Because I think a lot of people have the same situation.
Yeah. Well, I think from a starting, well, at least taking the idea to reality, we had a great agency helping us. So I think you need to have a partner that will reassure you about there is a trend, you should try it at least, because again, it was really around innovation, while at the French League at that moment, we were kind of running late on activating digital. So I think first was the idea, and then to actually jump in. And from a fan and audience perspective, yes, I absolutely truly align with Tatiana, is you realize that this audience is completely different. They are indeed younger, but you feel that they are not consuming TV as the previous generations, and TV is our first, well, revenue driver. They are not very loyal to a specific channel. They are consuming a lot of content. I feel they ask for more interactivity. They want to actually be part of the game. So it's, I think by going into esports, you actually realize something that has probably have struck all different sport organizations, clubs in the last few months or last few years, is that, yes, the generations ahead are changing. So if you don't switch your mind, if you don't think differently, TV will not help you on the long term. So you need to really think about how to engage with them. So I think, yeah, to have an esport mind internally pretty early, help us building our digital strategy and being very much into direct to consumers or direct to fans.
Excellent. Let us get into some audience questions, and thank you all for your questions so far. Keep them coming. We'll get to as many as we can over the next 20 minutes or so. This one may be for André. It's from Ollie Thomas from Sport Buff. Hello, Ollie. Could you ever see proper gamification intertwine with home viewing of sport? So can people game and watch sport at the same time on the same platform in the future? It's a bit of a technical one possibly, but is that the way we're heading?
Good question. You should ask young people. I think I'm not able to do it, but I'm also like, I can only focus on one piece. Yes, maybe not. Maybe the level of interactivity can also go into another direction, and maybe you participate in what you're watching. So maybe that's the connection you have with 5G, that what you're actually viewing on the TV maybe is connected somehow. But this is just it's an assumption. Interesting question. If you find out the answer, I'm also very interested.
Yeah, good answer. Good answer. One for probably for Tatiana and then maybe Christophe. It's from Vijay Setlur from the Schulich School of Business. So hello, Vijay. Thank you for being with us. Tatiana, how have you integrated your athletes into your gamification initiatives to not only heighten fan engagement, but also to help build the athlete brand? This is a key question, obviously.
Absolutely. Well, one was the example I brought up earlier about when we ended our NBA season and we brought our athletes to the game and allowed them to finish out playing NBA 2K. Also, within the NBA League, we created a competition amongst all the teams. So we selected key athletes to compete against others within the league, and it became a tournament over the course of a couple weeks. And then we also brought in some outside athletes. So, for example, we had a soccer player who played on the Indiana Pacers NBA 2K game. So there's certainly opportunities to cross promote the teams and the brands and the leagues. But the biggest hurdle with that is that not all of our athletes are into esports or into e-gaming. And so again, going back to that question of education, you know, there's also an education piece for our athletes, and it takes a lot of understanding if what their interests are, and if this is an opportunity for us to align their personal interests with some fan engagement opportunities.
Christophe, obviously the LFP doesn't have the players under its control directly. Obviously they belong to the clubs, but how have you been able to weave in, or how are you thinking about weaving in the players to what you're doing?
Well, indeed, it's true. We don't have direct access to the players, but it's true that when creating content, you try to involve as much as possible the players, for example, by mentioning them into your social publications in order for them to repost, comment, and create engagement. But I think the real opportunity is indeed for clubs. And it's true that something that must be taken into account on how to activate the players. As I said earlier, we kind of have a switch on the younger generations. I feel that, well, my generation, or probably also my dad's generation, they were following a club. And I feel that the younger audiences, well, they follow a club, but they more likely follow a player. So now you have players with huge and incredible communities in terms of number. So as a club, you definitely must collaborate with your players, create content for them, try to cross-post content from the club to the players, because once a content is posted by the club, you know that if the player interacts, your reach is way bigger. So yes, it's definitely something that you need to think about in a digital club strategy. And I think the second topic is that when it comes to FIFA, the football players, the professional football players, well, I think it's the same in France, but in any European country, they are huge, so massive FIFA players. So if you involve them into an esport activation, as we did during the COVID lockdown, it's true that you're going to have, they will be very keen to do it, and you will have engagement on their side, and they will post that on their personal social channels. So it's true that using the players definitely helps increasing the reach.
And André, this must be something that you see across all your clients and across all sorts of different sports.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, also esports, it's built on helping each other, yeah? and being an inclusive environment, and also crossovers help a lot. And if you can include this into your overall digital strategy, then then that's the Champions League. It's easier than it sounds, but it's possible.
Here's a question from Christophe Kazaks from AFC Bournemouth, Premier League club. Christophe, good to have you with us. It's a big question, and it's really the elephant in the room, I suppose. In your opinions, do you think esports poses a threat to traditional sports clubs and leagues in terms of attracting a younger generation of fans in the future? So this obviously gets to the heart of do you view esports as complementary and as a driver of your business, or ultimately as a potential rival? Tatiana, I'm going to throw this one to you first for a viewpoint. You've obviously got a foot in both camps, if you like, but how do you see that in terms of future fans?
I don't know if I would say that it's necessarily a threat. I think there is plenty of opportunity for it to be complementary and that both worlds can exist. But I certainly think that you'll start to see certain younger niche audiences that will bubble up to the top. And eventually those will, as André was saying, start to have a really, really strong following. But then you're always going to have that fan base of probably older people who will still want to lean more towards the traditional. I do think, though, as we think about market saturation, there's going to be a point where there's going to be so much competition and saturation of entertainment options that it will make it challenging for the Gen Z audience to decide where their priorities lie, if it will be in the e-gaming world or on the more traditional side of things. But I think as marketers, it will be up to us to really listen to our audiences, stay abreast of trends and behaviors, and not be afraid to pivot our strategies where we need to.
Christophe, anything to add to that?
Well, I'm not from the younger generation, the one that actually massively consumes esports. But, well, I think I agree with Tatiana, meaning that esports helps us engaging with some audience niches that probably we wouldn't have spoken otherwise. But from my perspective, I think nothing will replace a live experience from a traditional sport. I mean, we see that all fans from around the world wanted the competitions to resume. So I think there will still be traditional sports, and esports will act and work as a complement to traditional sports, will help engage probably new audiences. But for any club, for any league, for any organization that will actually work on both ways, you need to have a strategy that, of course, involves traditional and esport for sure.
If I can just add on to that just a little bit, I also think that if the audience base continues to rise the way the projections are showing, it's actually a great opportunity to reverse that and send those audiences back to traditional sports. So one of the ideas that we've thought about is, do we bring more tournaments to our arena, to our building, so that the e-gaming sports fans and audiences can actually compete within our building? And then we're using that data of people who have then entered our building, who have signed up and registered and things like that, to retarget them for other traditional marketing and sports tactics that we have. So again, I think it can totally be complementary.
you've essentially, Tatiana, I think, answered a question that was sent in by Anita Smith, MBA, WNBA agent, around using gamification as a tool to get fans into stadiums and arenas. And obviously there's plenty of opportunity there, and that's going to become a significant challenge for the industry across the board. Christophe, André, beyond putting esports events into arenas, what about the future of the in-stadium experience and using some of the elements that we see in esports and gaming to help with that?
I think if you look at the value of production that you see at some esports events and Riot Games with League of Legends is up the forefront. They're using AI technology, creating live music. This is another level, and this is where sports can learn a lot from, because I think in sports we at some point a little bit conservative, which is good and bad at the same time. And this opens up new doors. And also maybe to add on the question between a threat, could esports be a threat? Yes and no. At the moment, this year, we will turn around 500 million esports fans globally that say they watch an esport event at least once a month. That's about the size of the NFL fan audience worldwide. If the comparison is not fair, because esports is a collective of more than just one sport, while football, NFL is one sport, but it gives you a little bit of a size. When you look at the amount of spending from an NBA fan or NFL fan versus an esports fan, then esports fans spend comparable less than a regular and average NBA or NFL fan does. When you look at the stadiums that you see that are sold out, you have to in esports, you have to consider that in Germany, every 2 weeks, a football stadium is filled, hopefully again soon, and an esports event happens maybe 4 times a year in Germany, a big one. So yes, this is coming, but it's still slow. And on the other hand, and this is where I see the fear, when you look at the average age of a lot of Olympic sports, when you look at the average age of a regular tennis fan, when you look at the average age of a handball fan, they should strongly consider working on getting new audiences before it's too late. But for some sports, like football and basketball, for instance, I 100% agree with what Christophe and Tatiana said.
We've got just a few minutes left, so I wanted to start to conclude the session by talking about how a lot of these elements that we've talked about over the last 40 minutes or so are integrated into your overall digital strategies, which you have and you're working on constantly, I'm sure. Christophe, from an LFP point of view, a Ligue point of view, how does it work, and where do gamification tools and these fan engagement initiatives that we've talked about fit into your big plan?
Well, at the moment, we actually split our digital roadmap, if I can call it a roadmap, into 4 pillars. First pillar is audience generation, and by audience generation, it means connecting with our fans, but also reaching younger audiences, as we mentioned. The second piece is actually registration and data collection. So we need to know our fans even more. So it's important to get as many insights as we can of all our competition fans. The third pillar is retention. We need to stick with them and make sure they engage and re-engage with our platforms. And the last one is when I think of one critical challenge for any digital marketer is to show the value of what you're doing. I'm a digital marketer, but how do I connect with the business objectives of LFP? How do I generate revenue? How do I create new inventory for our sponsors? So if I take those 4 pillars, audience, acquisition, retention, and revenue generation or valorization, gamification sits in the 4 pillars. So it's something we actually integrate into the 4 pillars. gamification help us actually reaching new audiences that we won't be able to reach with our traditional social channels or web or applications. They are very keen into playing and playing again. So that's true that it helps doing acquisition, retention, and push them to visit over and over again the platform of gamification. And if I can give an example, of course, if tomorrow when we're going to have to build our score predictor platform, this is typically a digital activation that we can actually sell to any betting operator, because there is like an instant bridge and a direct link into doing your score predictor on a platform, and then probably have a redirect to an official betting platform for the Ligue 1. So it's really, when we think about gamification, it really fills all the different steps of our digital strategy, and it fits 100% into the 4 pillars.
Tatiana, same question to you, really. From a Pacers sports and entertainment point of view, how are you knitting all this together?
Yeah, I think Christophe summed that up very well, so I'm going to steal his entire answer. But in addition to that, I think that, you know, how we look to engage our fan base is really going to be key for us, so that we can determine what additional revenue driving opportunities there are to monetize with this new younger fan base. So I think, again, driving the awareness, bringing them into a consumer journey that we then can set up to figure out additional revenue streams and additional ways of reaching a new audience.
André, when you're advising clients in terms of their digital strategy and listening to what they're thinking about, how much flexibility should you be building into a digital fan strategy, and how long should a digital fan strategy be?
The question is this only a digital topic? A lot of people, it's always like digital is this one pillar, but this is actually a much more bigger picture that's part in every piece of the company. And I think that process is still ongoing in a lot of companies to actually make this an integrated part in different departments. And then you come quickly to fascinating places where you realize that maybe your esports engagement is related to your HR campaign, because you're using esports to attract new employees. This is something that SAP, for instance, does, and is the main reason why I invested into esports. If you look a little bit beyond that digital topic and have the bigger picture, there are a lot of checkboxes then that this opportunity can bring you.
Final question to each of you. Let's move 5 years into the future. What does the digital fan experience look like? Huge question, impossible to answer, but do give it a go.
I start? You start, Tatiana?
You can start.
Okay. Well, I think it's still very complicated to project ourselves in a digital world in a 5 years period. I had an agency past before working at the French League, and sometimes some of our clients were telling me, "Can you build us the digital strategy for the next 10 years?" And I was answering, well, I don't know where we will be standing in a year from now, so it's very complicated to actually, digital involves change and innovation, so it's very complicated. But I think if I had to make some guesses that we are pretty confident with, it's obvious that digital fan experience will be very related to technology in the next few years. Within the stadium, but also outside the stadium, we know that of course, our fans are more and more using different channels, different technology. They have like a mobile phone 24/7. So we know that technology will be very present in their lives And when it comes to a stadium experience, I think one of the greatest take that we have and that most of the clubs and franchise should work on is you need to have a zero pain point experience while you go at the stadium. You need to access the stadium easily. You need to park your car easily. You need to access with public transportation easily. You need to order your food easily. And all this is related to technology because we know that now the clubs are working with several systems, infrastructure and applications to make it perfectly fluid for the fan. So yes, this is, I think, one of the big topic. And the second topic, I think, is what André mentioned. It's still something at a very early stage, but it will have a huge impact, is how augmented reality and virtual reality will change the way we consume live games. We consume live game on TV, we consume live games at the stadium, but what about consuming a stadium experience while at home? So I know that some sports are starting doing it. So yes, I think it will be definitely a great trend in the next few years, hopefully.
André, just a couple of lines from you to conclude.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely agree. I mean, the easiest answer to this is like, it's very hard to predict the future and the only constant is change, but that doesn't help you when you need to make a plan for 3 to 5 years. So you need to shoot in a direction or two. My feeling at the moment is that with emerging technology, with emerging connectivity, with people being close to each other because they share the same passion, no matter where they are in the world, and maybe are more not familiar with the neighbor because they're not sharing the same passion. This is the world that keeps developing based on technology. And if you understand that this happens, no matter if you like it or not, this is a good time to try out which is the best direction for you, which things are working, which things are not working, and make sure you participate in things that are already going on. You don't have to build everything from the scratch on your own on a lonely island, but rather look around you because there are other people out there who have the same problem, and there are other people out there who maybe have the right solution. And to bring people together and then work in that direction, I think is a good strategy.
Tatiana, you have the final word.
Yes, I would just add on to my colleagues and just say that, it's really hard to create a roadmap beyond 2 years at this point. As we saw from the coronavirus, there's, always going to be a wrench thrown in the plans that'll make us have to pivot. But I think that within the next 5 years, there's going to be more touch points that are focused on digital safety, health, being touchless, being cashless, and improving technology through predictability and AI and automation. And I think that if we continue to, as I mentioned earlier, look at the younger generation and find ways to reduce friction, that'll lead our path towards figuring out what's the best strategy within the next 5 years.
Tatiana, thank you so much for joining us today. André, Christophe, your time is much appreciated, as is your expertise, and there's so much we've covered and so much we have yet to cover, so we will aim to do that another day. Thank you all for your time. Thank you to you for watching as well. It's very much appreciated. We know you have a choice of webinars. You can view this all again on demand in the next couple of hours, so look out for an email in your inbox where you will find details of how to watch it all again. Thank you again for being with us, and we will see you very soon. Bye-bye.